All right, what's up, everybody? The Celtics' reign as defending champions is officially over. The Oklahoma City Thunder are your new NBA champions, taking down the Indiana Pacers, in Game 7. We'll talk about that. The Tyrese Halliburton injury that was really tough to watch. We all, as Celtics fans, know what that feels like. What does that
Mhm.
mean going forward? KD's going to the Rockets. It's NBA draft week. The Celtics offseason has officially begun. I've got my guy Khari Thompson here in the building to help us break it all down. All that and more coming up next here on Green with Envy. You guys know the deal. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? My guy Greg Menenges, he is on vacation this week, but that's okay. That means that we're going to the bullpen. And today I've got my guy from Boston.com, the Chief, Khari Thompson, is here to talk all things basketball with me. Khari, good to see you, my guy.
Good to see you, Will. What's up? What's up? How you living,
Uh,
bro?
Hey, doing good, man. We were just talking off air, I was telling you about my new journey into fatherhood here. So it's been a spring/summer that, just is continuing to have more and more stops along the way, a very busy spring and summer. And I'm excited. We haven't talked in a little bit here, man. And you just got finished covering the Celtics. Kind of, I know they're kind of you could doing the Celtics a little bit here, Patriots here, but full season, you were on that Celtics beat. And so I'm kind of excited to talk with you just about hoops, Celtics in general. How's it been for you, kind of decompressing from the basketball season, which obviously the NBA season officially ended last night, which we'll talk about, but the Celtics season, which you probably weren't expecting, ended several weeks ago. So you've had a little bit more time than you probably expected. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, well, it's been good. First of all, congrats on becoming a dad. That's an
Yeah, I
awesome journey.
appreciate
I'm happy for you. So good stuff there. I want to say that it's been life is Celtics fans are gonna hate me saying this, but life has been good since the Celtics have been out. Like, you know what I mean? I got some
It's the work-life
downtime.
balance. Work
I
work
got
life
some, I
when
got
it's your full-time job, it's a different beast.
Listen, man, I'm taking 2 of these next 3 weeks off. I'm chilling, man. I got a little tan going. I've been outside. Like, life has been good for real. But obviously, so I was there in New York for everything that went down, and obviously, a disastrous series. Not just from the perspective of Tatum being hurt. Obviously, that's the huge storyline, and what a moment that was being in there for Madison Square Garden and seeing Tatum go down like that. Insane. Um,
You
but
know what?
also
Let me pause you right there because that is, and we'll come back to this, but I think that right there is actually just a good segue into something that happened last night. Like when
sure,
you saw
Tyrese.
Tyrese Halliburton and go down, were you having flashbacks to kind of comparing, like, oh shit, I saw this live, but in New York?
No, not to Tatum rupturing his Achilles because it was a completely different situation, right? This Tatum had already dropped 40 points. He was having a monster game. Um, it's similar in that it was a non-contact injury off of a turnover, but the Celtics are already losing. They're already down 9. They're going to lose that game anyway. So it was a completely different situation. Hallie ruptures his Achilles. He had already had 3 threes and he was like 5 minutes into the game. Like
He was
it was
talking shit
completely
too.
crazy. So, I will bring up another Tatum injury that I think is more apt of a comparison, and I will bring up Game 7,
Yep.
2023, first possession. Tatum rolls his ankle, and then it's like, now what are you gonna do? The guy is gone. It's supposed to be the Jalen game, and I hate to bring up this thread because I like Jalen as a player, but we saw what happened in game three, in game 7 of that series. How Jalen had those 8 turnovers and said he let the city down. And he came back stronger and won finals MVP next year, but that was a turning point for him. And we saw what happened with Tatum out in game 6. Also,
Hmm.
similar situation. Tatum, Jalen with 7 turnovers and fouling out in the third quarter. And we have to give him props for a masterful game 5 at home because I thought he was
Yeah.
excellent in game 5.
One of
We're
his
not
best
gonna
games he's ever played.
we're not going to forget his 12 assists. We're not going to forget how he willed that team to victory, and we're not going to forget how they blew out the Knicks at the Garden. We're going to give Jalen his full props for that. But to me, that Pacers team having to figure out on the fly how to play without Halliburton and working through. Oh, are we going to play entirely through Siakam? Are we going to work it into Miles Turner? See if we can get some stuff down
Yeah.
low, and just having to navigate getting almost nothing from their role guys offensively. uh, it brought back flashbacks to 2023. I want to know what you think about that comparison.
No, it's funny you bring that up because in the moment I had a similar thought because one of the things that's come up a bunch of times throughout the years, and part of this is that Esbar Rahini, we mentioned this on the last podcast. He's one of our favorite guests to have on here. He covers the Raptors. He's now at the Athletic doing their morning show, and a lot of times he would come on the show, and me and Greg would kind of have our Jalen capes on. It'd be a Jalen versus Siakam type debate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things throughout this series, and not even just this series, this playoff run for the Pacers, is Greg and I have started to talk about, like, do we have to reevaluate the way that we kind of blew off Siakam? Not that he was trash or anything, right? But just like, you know, Greg put it really well that we would defend Jalen as a top 15 to 20, 25 player. And we were like, listen, Siakam's good, but he's like in the 30 to 40 range. Which, you know, that's not like numbers wise, it doesn't seem like there's a big of a gap. But when you start tearing it out, it does feel like that's way bigger. And it's certainly not that. I can't say it's that anymore. And so when you bring that up, that was something that jumped to my mind, was like, all right, listen, Jalen, and specifically more so in 2023 against the Heat than I thought of this year with Jalen, because that game 5 was so masterful. And then, you know, game 6, Celtics got their doors blown off, and I actually thought Jalen was, you know, he was forcing it, but he kind of had to at certain points. And I thought he was actually pretty good in that game. Everyone else stuff. Like that was so I wouldn't even put that on Jalen. But in that Miami Heat game 7 game, he just didn't have it in that moment, right? And there's other things that you can look to, like Malcolm Brogdon was also supposed to be a part of that. He was injured. Like we can get into all that. But it made me think, man, if Siakam steps up right now with Halliburton going down in a somewhat comparable situation, like that's definitively a tiebreaker of any Siakam and Jaylen Brown debate. He probably would have won the finals MVP too if somehow the Pacers were able to pull it off. And they were up at halftime, man. Like this Pacers team was so crazy. So I think it's really funny that you brought that up, because that did cross my mind as well when looking at this series. And I think Siakam, you know, obviously the Thunder winning will be the main takeaway, because, you know, this is something that's felt not inevitable, but it's felt like it's their season. Like this, it ended up ending the way that I think made the most sense. But I think this Pacers team is really going to sit with me kind of going forward with just how impressive this run is. And I think Siakam is probably, you know, and obviously Halliburton's clutchness will be something that I take away. But I think the underrating of Siakam as a player and the move to go get Siakam is something that I think is going to stick with me, as well as I think we're going to see those ripples going into the offseason.
Well, I'll tell you, the Pacers, even though it was technically a sweep, they played the Celtics tougher than anyone last year. And
that's what Missoula said.
Siakam was a huge part of that. Like Tyrese wasn't fully healthy in that series either. Like, and that's something that you have to take into account with him going forward, is that health is pretty consistently an issue with this guy. And you know, it was a similar situation, you know, like it's Siakam and it's TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin and a bunch of guys who can't create their own shot trying to score against elite defenses. And it worked for a while. I think the Pacers were playing off of pure adrenaline and emotion, trying to stay in it after Halliburton got hurt. But they just ran out of steam. They had a stretch where they went scoreless for like 10 minutes in a row and just could not buy a bucket. And I think OKC's length really bothered them. But also, I just think that they didn't have enough dudes that could dribble around and create their own shot and just make offense. Like they were whipping it to the corner for Miles Turner to look at some threes. They had Aaron Nesmith try a couple pull-ups at the top of the key, but that slashing and driving and kicking that SGA excelled at, that you missed from Halliburton, it really hurt Indy down the stretch not having that.
Yeah, just not enough playmaking without Halliburton out there really to sustain. And even, you know, you mentioned that run where they couldn't score. TJ McConnell goes on like he's the only player on Indiana to score for, I think it was like a 10-minute stretch. And, you know, even though TJ McConnell, who I was overly impressed with in this entire series. Like, he has 16 points last night. He keeps them afloat offensively, but he also had 7 turnovers. And part of that is just the suffocating defense. And I think at the end of the day, for the Thunder, their offense is, and this is the scary part because of how young they are, their offense is nowhere near what its ceiling probably is. But their defense it could be so overwhelming in certain stretches that's what really won this. Like, you think about the end of game 4 when it felt like, holy shit, the Pacers are going to go up 3-1 and maybe win the title. Like, they're not even just going to win the title. They might do this like emphatically going up 3-1. And then that Thunder defense just shut off the faucet for the last, half hour of that game, whatever it might be. And then last night you look to that third quarter and, they came out down 1 at halftime. They, get the lead up to like 19-20, basically, like by the end of it. And that really kind of was the game there. And, this Pacers run, it was impressive, but and tell me if I'm wrong, like it feels like at the end of the day, and there's still parts of me that's dealing with the Celtics having lost to the Knicks, because it's like, man, for all the injuries that came out afterwards and everything that was wrong, you still had 2 20-point leads at home in games 1 and 2, and a 14-point lead before Tatum blows out his Achilles, right? So it's still like, there's a part of me, and I hate this, but there's still a part of me that's like, I kind of still think the Celtics were the best team in the East. They're not. They lost. Straight up, They lost, so they can't be. But it does feel like ultimately, even though how we got here was definitely not how we expected, the Thunder winning the championship, it feels right based on the season they had, the MVP, all the players they had. Does it feel right to you?
Well, I'll say this. I think talent-wise, the Celtics are more talented than both the Pacers and the Knicks. I think they had some things that went wrong that were unfortunate. And I think we also just need to call the Knicks series what it was, a gag job. Like, that's just what they sucked. I mean, like, they had it.
And real quick, two things can be true at the same time. The Knicks won that series. The Celtics also gagged that series. Like, I'm a big believer in the gray. Like, there doesn't have to be one thing or the other. Both things can be true. You can't lose 2 20-point leads at home and a 14-point lead in the desperation game and say you didn't gag. But at the same time, the Knicks earned those wins. So I think both things are true.
Sure. I mean, the Knicks got timely contributions from you guys, and that's what's interesting. It's like, okay, you don't need OG Anunoby to go off every single game, but you do need OG Anunoby to have a good game 1 and hit a bunch of threes when you need it. Like, you know what I mean? You don't need Jalen Brunson to come through in the clutch every game, but you do feel confident with him walking the Celtics down when they have those big leads. And then you don't need Karl Anthony Towns to go crazy in the post every game, but you do need him to put them away like he did in game 6, because he was just bullying the Celtics down low and they just couldn't stop it. But I'm putting the majority of that on the Celtics because they were the better team. They were leading for the vast majority of the series. And
it's really crazy to think about, man. It's improbable, like how much they were leading. Other than game 6, they were winning in every single game by good amounts, by good portions of the game.
And then the flip side of that is, even with a healthy Tatum, you're down 3-1. Like, I don't care what you say. They were losing that game 4.
Yeah.
Like, they were down 9 with 3 minutes to go, and Tatum was going off, but it would have taken something miraculous to pull off that comeback. Like, so it's like the Tatum injury is not an excuse at all.
Yeah, and that leads us to kind of like where we are now with the Celtics offseason. So as we're recording this, it's Monday afternoon. The draft is Wednesday. Celtics hold pick 28 in the first round, pick 32 in the second round. And, let's start here, Khari. So with Halliburton's injury last night, it's just been a weird postseason. 3 of the East's best players, all who happen to wear number 0, make of that what you will, blow out their Achilles, from Dame Lillard to Jason Tatum to Tyrese Halliburton. So presumably all of those guys are out next season. And, we know what needs to happen for the Celtics offseason. They got to get under the luxury tax. They got to, shave some salary. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But just in general, how weird is the Eastern Conference going to be next year with the team that just made the finals having this horrific injury? The Celtics, who were the presumed favorite the last 2 seasons, losing their best player in the playoffs. The Bucks maybe have the best player overall in the conference, but he has no help around him. His best help just blew out their Achilles, and he's also 34, 35 years old, however old Dame is. Like, this started coming up, like, once the Thunder had a hold of it in my group chat, is what do we make of the East next year? Because the Cavs and Knicks, who felt like they were a little rocky at the end of their seasons, the Knicks fired their coach. The Cavs like are scratching their heads, like, we just won 64 games, but we can't get out of the second round. We lose in 5 games. Like, both of those teams got to be like, I guess we're just running it back because everybody else is hurt, right? Like, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Knicks, honestly. Like, I think that I don't know. I'm a little biased because I was down at Villanova at the same time as Brunson and Bridges and all those guys. So I'm like, okay, you guys are leaning completely all the way in to the Nova identity. Like, just go ahead and hire Jay Wright, bro. Like, let's go. Like, go get you a championship. Like, I don't know. I like what they did with that team, and I thought that they weren't better than the Celtics, but they put themselves in position to take advantage of the Celtics shaking us. That's how I'll phrase that. Like, they went all in. They spent a bunch of picks on Bridges, and they brought in Karl Anthony Towns. And I think those 2 moves didn't put them over the edge of the Celtics, but I think it put them in a position where if something weird happens, like it did, like they were ready to pounce. And so I think ultimately
1,000%.
that was a smart move, and they have their guys under contract. And yeah, you look at the situation, you're like, we could win this thing. Like, Indiana's been our Achilles heel. Like, Indiana's been the Knicks' Achilles heel. They've eliminated them 2 years in a row. Now they don't have Halliburton. Like, I think that the Knicks are real interesting. Like you said, we don't even know where Giannis is going to be for real, because like the reports are all about him.
Well, this is the other kind of
trades.
question of this, right? Is like, when you look at all these injuries, does it make the Bucks feel like, I mean, listen, if you're the Bucks, unless he requests a trade, you probably shouldn't trade Giannis, even though I could sit here and make a case for, listen, you could get back with the best trade package anyone's ever seen. If you really want to put Giannis out there and just kind of reboot your franchise, you got the championship, you can make that case. But when you look at just how weird the East is, it's like, even though I hate the Bucks roster around Giannis, especially without Dame, like, you still have Giannis. Like, in all reports make it seem like he's off the table for now, but maybe it just makes them feel like, listen, Halliburton's out, Tatum's out, we ain't afraid of anybody else. Like, our chances might be just as good. So maybe this makes them hold on to Giannis just a little bit longer because the East feels so open.
Yeah, if you have Giannis, you have a puncher's chance. And so I don't know. It's not a great chance in my opinion, but like, it might be worth the risk. I mean, it ultimately depends on what your goals are and how long you can tolerate a rebuild, because that might be rough in a smaller market. Like, it's all about your risk tolerance. But you're right. It's a weakened and diminished East. Although Cleveland really underachieved, but I think you got to look at them as the favorites going into, especially just like considering all the health things that have happened. Like,
yeah, we were saying in one of my group threads yesterday, like during the finals, like, it feels like if you're the Cavs and the Knicks, you almost need to, make a few, changes on the margins, but you have to look at this right now, a few small tweaks, but run it back. And it feels like you guys got to look at, like, this is our East. Like, the Pistons are young. Yes, the Magic made the move for Desmond Bane. Celtics are hurt. Pacers are hurt. Bucks are hurt. Like, if this isn't the Knicks and Cavs feel like they got to be looking in the mirror. Like, if this isn't our year, I don't know when it's going to be, because this, like we should have the 2 teams that are the most ready to make that move. And, then this got into a whole argument with one of our friends who's a Knicks fan, who I was like, Knicks got the pressure. It's like, what pressure? It's like, man, it's New York, and they have all of this capital. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals. The window's wide open. I feel like the Knicks got to get it done next year, or I don't know. They're going to look at some type of changes. They're not going to run it back 3 years if they can't get it done next year, is my opinion.
And they're getting older. Like, all those dudes are in their late 20s. All those dudes are like around my age. So it's like, then you start getting after next year to the 29, wrong side of 30 of things. And I think you got to recalibrate if you haven't won anything. So I do like to make it 13 though for next year.
Let's go down the recalibration route, because that's kind of where the Celtics are, right? They're retooling, which I believe was the phrase that Shams used in his reporting of a non-report last week. And so, I know you've taken some time like to kind of get your work-life balance back since
Yeah.
the end of the season, but we don't need to go through everything that needs to happen. We know KP is available. We know Drew is obviously likely available. Celtics need to shave some money, but also now there's not now, but there is this balance of like, hey, we still want to be competitive, and we also still want to have flexibility and a decent roster for when Tatum comes back. And so it's this interesting balancing act that Brad Stevens is going to have to play. What are some of, if you have any thoughts as to what you think, as someone that was around this team all year, as to what you think or how you think this offseason might actually play out?
Yeah, I think you hit at the right question, right? How do you feel the competitive team for this year, and get under the second apron, and make sure you have a chance at winning for next year? So
Mhm.
keeping those three questions in mind, hate to say it, but to me, the most obvious piece that you look to move is Drew Holiday,
Yeah.
because as great as Drew is, and as much as he put the Celtics over the top in 2024, you're playing 2 years out. You're not. I don't think the Tatumless Celtics are title contenders, in my humble opinion. So and this is Boston. The goal is championships. So you're really constructing this with 2 years from now. How can I put Tatum in the best position to win a title? And having Drew Holiday make $35 million a year as your starting point guard, to me, at 36 years old, to me, is not something that is going to be conducive to that. Especially when I think you could get something nice for Drew based on his reputation. Like,
Yeah.
Drew has a title with the Bucks, and he helped put them over the top. He has a title with the Celtics, and helped put them over the top. And so he's known as this like finishing piece, like at least in the East, but probably throughout the league. So it's like, to me, that's the most obvious piece, because if you're looking at Porzingis, yes, Porzingis makes a lot of money. Yes, Porzingis is hurt / sick all the time. Like, we just got to be real about that. He literally played half the regular season games this year. Played
Yeah.
42 out of 40, right? So I can see how it would be tempting to be like, this guy's not even here half the time, and he's making 30 mil. Let's trade him. Well, here's what I say about Porzingis. Porzingis ain't as old as you think. Porzingis is what, 29? He's not 30 yet. So, granted, his body type is kind of weird, so he is more prone to those injuries, but he's not as old as you think, and he's what I call a ceiling raiser, right?
Yeah.
So he's not healthy all the time, but when he is healthy, the Celtics are on a different level, just with the way he can space the floor, just with his rim protection. And, even as bad as he was in the playoffs, like, if you look at the totality of what he did this season, even coming off his injuries, he was still averaging around 20 points a game. He was still getting his rebounds. He shot 40+% from three. He's a 7'2" unicorn. How many of those guys are floating around out there? There's one.
Yeah.
That's why he's the unicorn. Like, you're not gonna go get another Porzingis. So it's like, to me, you might move one starter. You might even have to move two, depending on how the money works and what your goals are. But if you're gonna move one first, I hate to say it because like Drew is a great guy, but like,
Mhm.
to me, Drew makes the most sense. Like, if you're just looking at it from a pure cold-hearted basketball and numbers perspective.
So I saw a little bit of trivia this morning after last night, and everyone has talked about there's been 7 different champions over the last 7 seasons, right? So
Mhm.
since 2020, there's only 3 guys that have 2 rings. Drew
Yep.
Holiday's one of them. Can you name the other 2?
They have 2 rings. Uh, and this is after last night, so this could include OKC.
Exactly.
Um,
In fact, I'll give you a hint. It does include somebody on OKC.
yeah, I'm trying to think. So Caruso.
There you go. It's
Um,
Caruso. You got Holiday. Can you get the
who?
third guy?
Oh,
His
the
his I'll
third
I'll tell
guy.
you
Who
this.
the
His name was
hell?
in the news recently.
Oh, KD.
It's not KD, but
Oh,
I'll just tell you who it is KCP.
yeah, he does have 2 rings.
Lakers
That's
Nuggets,
crazy.
right? So that's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, that's
That was an
wild.
interesting note that I saw.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but to your
yeah.
point, I want to get that trivia question in there. But to your
That was a
point,
great one.
yeah, I like that one too. I think you're right as far as it's I think it's without a doubt Drew Holiday is where this offseason is heading. I think if I had to bet right now, I would guess Kristaps at least starts the season on the Celtics. Maybe midway through he gets moved. But I think just with that weird illness, I don't know what you make of his value. Like I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. It's hard to see somebody being like, yeah, I'm super excited. It's an expiring deal, so I think it will be able to be moved eventually. But because it's also expiring, I think it's less it's less of a priority to move. Whereas, Holiday's still got 3 years, 105 million. And to your point, that's you can eat that when you thought you had next year as also another title window, which I'm with you. Like, I think they can be competitive. I don't think they're not going to be a championship team. And so it's like, what value does that have? So I think it's going to be really important to find a Holiday suitor, and then what that price looks like. We'll see. I think the one guy that I'm almost convinced is definitely gone is Sam Hauser. I think
Yeah.
Sam is gone. It's a nice contract. It's easy to move. Teams always want shooting. He's got championship pedigree. And I think from a Celtics perspective, Baylor Shireman can kind of take his minutes in the rotation. They play differently. I'm not saying they're the same 1-to-1. But I think Shireman can take those 15 to 20 minutes. And you kind of need a little bit of an experimentation next year to be like, all right, let's see what we got with Shireman, and or Jordan Walsh also kind of falls into that category. So it will be interesting to see what happens with Drew Holiday. I know some teams have been rumored. Do you have? I feel like everyone kind of has like a fake trade of Drew Holiday that's been floating around, or a team. Do you have either a fake trade or a team that you think makes the most sense for Drew Holiday?
Uh, no, not really. I mean, people have been talking about Dallas, which I
It,
don't
it, it seems
know.
so obvious that I don't
Like,
think it's going to happen.
yeah,
I've done 6 different mock trades with the Mavericks involved. It's so obvious that it's just for some reason not going to be them.
yeah. Like sometimes things can just seem so real, and then like they don't end up being real. I don't know. I've heard the Clippers. I don't really see that. Like, it just has to be one of those teams that really just needs a finishing piece. And Dallas, I think, can be good. I think you're relying a lot on Cooper Flag if you're expecting them to be title contenders. Like,
Yeah,
because healthy AD, healthy Kyrie, but then this ain't 2018. Like these dudes are different different players from
right,
when they
right.
were back then. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
And so
you
that's
do
why
have some.
that's why I think Drew Holiday is like he's on their fake Nico Harrison timeline, right? Of
He is
like,
on
hey,
their
we got two
timeline though,
years.
because
So,
it's now.
I don't know.
It is now.
We'll see.
It is
Yeah.
now, and you do need to build up some goodwill with that fan base because
Hmm.
of what you just did to Luca. Like you backed into the Cooper Flag pick. Congratulations. But like you didn't deserve all that. Like that was the basketball gods somehow looking out for you. Like
Yeah.
because there's no way they should have got that pick.
Yeah,
So
it feels like the karma gods did. That was, I don't know. I don't think the lottery's rigged, but the karma gods, maybe that's rigged in some way. I don't know. But yeah, them getting Cooper Flag doesn't feel right, but it is what it is. And so maybe that does lead them to go down the Drew Holiday route. I know with the NBA draft coming up here in less than 48 hours, I don't know why the NBA does this so close. Like, I feel like you should have some space between
right.
your champion and then having an NBA draft. But neither of us are real big into college basketball or know the prospects in and out. So let me just keep it very broad for you here, Khari. What type of player? And now the Celtics have the 28th pick, so obviously keep that in mind. 28th pick, you're getting somebody that's coming out as a flawed prospect. Right? Like maybe it's a
Hmm.
shooter, maybe they're super athletic, but they're probably not. They're not going to be Cooper Flag. They're not going to be Dylan Harper or those guys who are going to be drafted at the top. But what type of skill sets? Knowing that, as we're talking about here, the plan is not necessarily for what can they do for you this year, what can they do for you the year after when Tatum comes back. what
Sure.
what type of player or what skills do you think Brad Stevens should be looking into?
To me, your big situation is really unstable because you don't know what's happening with Porzingis. You actually don't know what's happening with Al Horford. Al is 39. He's a free agent. The Celtics aren't
Or
really
Luke?
contenders next year. So, and also Cornette's a free agent, and Cornette's probably going to make a lot more money somewhere else next year, if I had
Yeah.
to predict it. I think Cornette's another one that's probably gone just through free agency. So it's like, all right, you look at your bigs, and it's like the only one we can kind of really guarantee is going to be here next year is like Mimi. So it's like you gotta you, you gotta do something at that position, in my opinion. That's where you start. You get a big. As far as skill sets, I think you want I think you want a big that can stretch the floor. Ideally, I don't know how many of those are out there, but like almost like a poor man's Porzingis type replacement.
Right.
See if you can draft that guy and maybe stash him. Like you're not necessarily looking for him to contribute next year because who knows? Maybe Al says I'll take less money, um, or maybe you end up keeping Porzingis and seeing what Mimi can do. But I think ideally for Missoula ball, to work, you got to have some ability to stretch that floor at the big positions. Both Al and KP do that, and we don't know where either one of those dudes is going to be next year. So, to me, a big that can stretch the floor. You already have an athletic big in Nimi who's a lob threat and who can help you rebound and provide some rim protection. So give me a big who's more of a finesse big, I would say.
It's interesting. I've been thinking about this the last couple of days, and you brought up Missoula ball, and I've been thinking about that as I'm watching the NBA finals play out. This is a sneaky big year for Missoula ball, and whether or not Missoula
Hmm.
ball is actually something that is a
Sure.
sustainable coaching philosophy, because when you have Jason Tatum, who's the Swiss Army knife of superstars, and you have a top seven that are all proficient 3-point shooters, yeah, I see the merits to it. You're about to have to adjust this roster pretty
Yep.
heavily between this year and the year following, and you may not have that luxury, right? And so, you just saw a team in the Oklahoma City Thunder that won a championship where in, I think it was game 4, they shot 17 threes. And they only won 3 of 17, but yet their
Hmm.
defense found them a way to win a game. So I'm very curious and see if you agree with this or not. I absolutely don't. I don't know if Joe Mazzulla's on the hot seat. I kind of think we're all a little too quick to put coaches on the hot seat. Like, he just won a championship last year. Like, let's pump the brakes.
Sure.
But I do think once we see what this roster looks like and the dust settles after whoever gets moved and what we have left, that this next year is really going to highlight who Joe Mazzulla is as a coach, because
Hmm.
the first 2 years you were playing with maybe the most talented roster, or the first 3 years he's been coach, you've had arguably the most talented roster in all of basketball, right?
Hmm.
And he's done great results. Game 7
Yeah.
Eastern Conference Finals, won a championship. Things fell apart this year, but you still were a 60 plus win team, and you went to the second round, and then your best player gets hurt. But I think next year is going to be a massive spotlight on Joe Mazzulla. And I think
Yeah.
specifically, and I'm going to ask you as a Boston media member, and you grew up there just like I did, so you know this, the quirkiness of Joe Mazzulla. Everybody kind of loved it this year when you're a defending champion, and he's giving answers that aren't really answers, and he's saying all this weird stuff, and what does it all matter? We're all going to be dead, like cool, like it's just Joe being Joe, and Manny being Manny was great too until it wasn't. So,
Yeah.
do you think there's going to be extra scrutiny on Missoula this upcoming year, kind of like I do?
Well, I'll bring this up. According to that Shams report from 3 years ago, this is a contract year for Joe.
Right.
Like
I did see
this
that as
is the
well. Yeah.
last year of his deal. So like, yes, it's a huge year for Joe Mazzulla. And you're right. I think I'll start here. The job that Joe Mazzulla has been signed to do, he's done at a very high level. The dude's won like three-quarters of his games, and he is a championship coach. As you mentioned, degree of difficulty, not that hard when you have Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, KP, Drew, all those guys. And you were handed a team that had made the finals the year before and lost the year before you took over. So, yeah, I agree with your point completely that this is a huge year for Joe to prove that he can adapt his style, because that's one of the things about that personality that people complain about is Joe is not the most open-minded guy. He can be stubborn sometimes. So that's that's a personality quirk that he will have to deal with, and he seems like he's the type of guy who prepares maniacally. So I'm sure this summer he is cooking up some alternative ways to play because he seems like he's just obsessed with ball like that.
Mhm.
But he seems like a true believer in his style and his system and just being who he is. And so that clash of needing to adjust but just believing in who you are is going to be an interesting push pull dynamic to follow all season because I truly don't know how it's going to play out. Like on paper, I
Yeah.
think they'll still be pretty good. Like they'll still be a playoff team, but like I don't think they're a top 3 team in the East anymore. I don't think they're a true contender, and there's gonna be bumps along the road. And you're right, when they start losing, people are gonna have way less patience for all that nobody
Mhm.
cares. We're all gonna be dead soon stuff. Like this is Boston, bro. Like
Yeah.
he's about to get into something whole different. Like if he keeps doing all that and they start losing, like you said, when they win, cool. But like we have to sit here and listen to that every day. And it's like, yeah, bro, you are not Belichick. Like, you're not accomplished like that. Like,
Actually, Kari, let me ask you this: how do you feel about Missoula press conferences? Because like you're asking questions, you're in there with everybody, and like honestly, like there's sometimes where I like it's not necessarily worth bringing up on the podcast all the time, and I kind of just think of it in my head, and I'm like, man, sometimes Joe just like answer the fucking question. Like there's that
mhm,
like that is what kind
sure.
of jumps to my mind sometimes. Like, do you ever feel that, and maybe not that aggressively, but like, do you ever feel that sometimes where it's like, all right, the shtick is like, can we just chill with it? And maybe you can just answer why you guys like were out rebounded by 20 tonight and not give me some,
Yeah,
some off the wall answer.
his shtick is super old and it goes beyond just the quirkiness. Like, it's just like, for the record, like, I don't think Joe's a bad guy. I
Yeah.
think he's a great coach, but like, his shtick to me is kind of ridiculous and disrespectful a lot of times. Like I'll use injuries as an example, right? So like we'll ask about an injury and like obviously you don't want to give the other team a competitive advantage, but like his whole shtick is to be like, I don't know. I haven't even talked to the guy. And I'm like, really, Joe? You haven't talked to the guy and you're looking towards PR and asking them like if they can say what the injury update is. I'm like, come on, man. Are we really supposed to believe that you don't know? You haven't talked to them? Like
Yeah.
stuff like that where I'm like, come on, Joe, find something else. You don't even have to tell us, but like don't openly, blatantly disrespect us. Come on now. And like the quirkiness, I don't have a problem with it because I think as a writer or as a media personality, you understand this. We want interesting people, right? And one thing I can say for Joe is that he's not boring.
Yeah,
Like,
he's definitely that. I'm fascinated by
uh,
him. I don't think I'd get along with him. I've been saying I think he and I have such different personalities. He loves to make people uncomfortable. I'm a bit of a people pleaser, and so like even people that I don't enjoy speaking with, you'll never know. I have a lot of people that think I'm their best friend, and I'm like, I don't really like that person. But just like I don't like living in that awkward space like he does. So I don't think he and I would ever get along. But I do find his personality and demeanor. I'm absolutely fascinated by it.
yeah, and also I'll say this. I will say that the way people are portrayed and the way they come across in the media can be different from how they actually are in real life. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't interacted with Joe a ton off the court, but I have a little bit. And Joe, the off court guy, way more cool than the Joe that's in front of the mics that we see. Like, I will throw him that bone. Like, it's
I
it's
mean, you
more of
mentioned
a
Belichick earlier. That's kind of the Belichick that, or what we've always heard about Belichick is like everyone's like, do you know how funny Bill Belichick is when he's not
yeah,
saying we're on to Cincinnati? Like everyone says he's
yeah.
hilarious. Like I mean, now what he's doing now is a little bit different, but back in the day, that was always the Bill Belichick take.
Yeah, it's more of a to me, it's more of a persona and figuring out who you are in that space. Because if you look at Joe's situation, like Joe is when he first took over was not this veteran coach with all this media like experience. Joe had been coaching in Maine and he had been an assistant with the Celtics and he was like kind of a lesser known assistant. And before that, he was a D2 college head coach. So like it's not like Joe came in with this completely perfected media personality. Like when he first came in, he was kind of winging it and doing as best as he could. And then And then his persona has evolved over time. Like all these quirky quotes and stuff, he wasn't doing all that. Like he was much
Mhm.
more standoffish at first. So like it's an evolution, right? And I think he's trying to find the right balance of not giving the other team information through the media, still being entertaining and engaging enough so that he doesn't lose the fan base. And trying to have somewhat of a productive relationship with the media so that he can get some goodwill, right? So I think he's balancing those three things and trying to figure out who he is in this space because he's still a young coach, man. The guy is 36, right?
Yeah, he's
Like,
my age.
yeah.
That's
So
that's the one thing I always fall back to when Greg and I talk about him is like it's way more likely he'd be a third man on this podcast than he would be the head coach of the Boston Celtics. Like
100%.
that's insane. That's
And so
insane that he's the head coach. Yeah,
he
at
got
that age.
thrown into the spotlight and he's done a really good job. Like I don't think anyone can objectively argue with Joe's record. I
Yeah,
think you can argue that the Celtics may have underachieved in 2023 and this year, both fair points. I think you can argue that his persona is a little weird and a little old, also a fair point. You cannot argue with his winning percentage. You can't argue with what actually has been done on the floor. Like, so that's where I stand on Joe, man. I'm like, Joe to me, for what they've assigned him to do, because he can't control the roster. Like he has to
yep.
play with who he has. It's not like he can say, "Oh, I want to be tested this year, trade everybody." He's got the good players, and he's won with the good players, and they seem to like him. So that's where I'm at
Yeah.
with Joe, and his press conference persona, I think, is a work in progress. And next year is going to be really interesting when it gets real. I want to see the heat.
Well, we'll have you back on during the season, Cars. I want to get your updated takes on Joe
Yes.
once we see what the season looks like. But quickly here, before I let you go, want to get your thoughts on the other piece of major news that came out yesterday before Game 7. The KD saga finally came to an end. He gets traded to the Houston Rockets for Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green, the number 10 pick coming up here on Wednesday night in 5 seconds. Just give me your thoughts on KD to the Rockets. Rockets were the number 2 seed in the West. Now they add 37-year-old Kevin Durant. What are your thoughts on that move?
I think it's real interesting. I think Amin Thompson's a player, and we saw him hit that game winner at TD Garden, earlier this year. So I think he's a player. I think that they got talent with Van Vliet and Şengün. I think Ime is a really good coach. I think that they are definitely going to be fun. And I think that I'm not putting them over OKC, even with KD, but I think they'll be in the mix. They'll be in that 2, 3 seed range. And ultimately, that's what you want because as we saw this year, weird stuff can happen in the playoffs. You want to be in the playoffs, to have home court advantage if you can, and to have a team that's talented enough that if weird stuff goes down, you can take advantage. I think Houston with this trade has done that.
I mean, to bring this full circle to something you said earlier in this podcast, I think they did exactly what the Knicks did last year, right? They looked at, okay,
Yep.
those are the Celtics. I don't know if we can beat them, but if we get Bridges and we get Towns and we reorient our team this way, we're a hell of a lot closer. And if something breaks our way, we get a chance, right? That's what I
Hmm.
think the Rockets did right now because I loved watching that Rockets team until the last 5 minutes of any game because unless Fred VanVleet had once every 6 games where he just somehow turned into Steph Curry, they just had nothing down the stretch, right? Like they just could not score in
Right.
tight games. And you saw that play out in that Warriors series where their offense was just abysmal. And yeah, you lose a little bit of defense with Dylan Brooks. Jalen Green, I'm not a huge Jalen Green guy. Like I see the potential and maybe it will pop for him, whether it's Phoenix or if they move him elsewhere. Maybe it will. I wouldn't rule that out, but he was just too inconsistent for what they need. And they kind of got his minutes ready to be replaced with the number 3 pick from last year in Reed Shepherd. And then you insert Kevin Durant as your closer, your guy that can get you 25 plus in his sleep. And then you still have all they did. For me, this is a home run for the Rockets without giving up Eason, without giving up Jabari Smith, without obviously giving up Amen Thompson, who I'm sure was never even discussed. That was a non-starter,
Sure.
but not giving up any of those other guys that are all going to benefit from Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green being out and given more time. And I hadn't even mentioned Cam Whitmore, who has a chance to maybe get some more playing time as well. Like, the Rockets still have all of their assets, all of their main assets, all their young players. You couple that with now KD, Fred VanVleet's also won a championship. Sengun made the All-Star game last year. Like, I love what the Rockets did, and I think it increased their potential short term to put them right in that Knicks line, like you talked about, where they're maybe not tier 1, but they're tier 1A or tier 2. And if something breaks,
Yeah.
if there's an injury, if maybe Chet breaks his hip later in the year instead of earlier in the year, and now all of a sudden
Sure.
Thunder aren't the same anymore, they're vulnerable. I think the Rockets are right there with the chance, and they did it all without harming themselves long term. And yeah, this is just an A+ move. I love everything about it for them. So I think this is a really interesting way to start the offseason. We had the Desmond Bane move to the Magic. We've got KD to the Rockets, and Khari. I'm ready for. I think this offseason is going to get real weird. So I'm ready for this to get real strange. And I think the Celtics are going to be right in the mix with all of it.
Oh yeah, we got some big time Celtics moves coming, so I can't wait to see what they do and talk about it with y'all when the time comes.
Hell yeah, man. Well, Khari, I appreciate you joining me here, man. I know you're on vacation this week, so go get your rest in, man. Go get some sunshine, enjoy yourself. And then for everybody that's listening, I know you're going to be doing some Patriots training camp coverage, right? So make sure everybody knows where they can find your stuff once you're back from vacation.
That's right. You can read me on Boston.com and BostonGlobe.com occasionally. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter @_ Khari Thompson. So stay posted, stay tuned, and yeah, we'll talk some football, man. If
That's
you're
right,
down
man.
for that.
I gotta get my Drake May fix in here. I'm into the path right now. So we'll definitely have you back when it gets a little bit closer to football season. We'll get some takes on that. But for everybody listening, appreciate you guys supporting the show. Greg's on vacation the rest of the week, but with the NBA draft happening on Wednesday night, at least the first round Wednesday night, second round will be Thursday night. Thursday morning, I will have a live stream going for you guys to be determined what time it is there. We're gonna pull in a guest here, and we will break down for you whatever happens Wednesday night. Could be a trade, could be a new center for the Celtics. We'll see. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll see what Brad has going, but we will have that for you on Thursday live on Twitter and YouTube. And then it will be, of course, on anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Appreciate you guys listening to us, and we will talk to y'all later. Peace.
Peace.